In medieval Europe, being labeled a traitor was not simply an insult, it was a legal sentence. It meant the loss of your land, your title, your freedom, and usually your head. But before they took your head, they did something worse. They marked your name. They attached a designation to your surname that followed your children and every generation after, a permanent brand announcing exactly what your family had done to the crown. Some of those marks are still sitting in modern surnames today, and the families carrying them have no idea. Let me be clear about what we are dealing with. In medieval England, treason was defined by the Treason Act of 1351 under Edward III, compassing the death of the king, levying war against him, adhering to his enemies, counterfeiting his seal. The punishment was not simply death, it was attainder. Attainder meant the total legal destruction of a person and their bloodline. Your property was forfeited, your titles extinguished, your children legally degraded, stripped of any inherited rank or right they would otherwise have claimed. The blood of a convicted traitor was considered corrupted, tainted, unfit to pass anything of value forward. That corruption was called corruption of blood, designed to make treason not worth committing, not just for you, for everyone who would come after you. It didn't work, because some families committed treason anyway, and the surnames they left behind are carrying that history right now. The first name on this list belonged to a family so thoroughly destroyed by attainder that their surname became a legal warning. We will get there in a moment. The Latin word for traitor was proditer, from prodere, to betray, to hand over, to deliver someone into the hands of their enemies. In medieval English and French records, families formerly convicted of treason were sometimes recorded with proditer, attached to their name, not as a title, as a permanent administrative label, appearing in court rolls, land records, and tax documents alongside the family surname. Proditer became so consistently attached to certain families that it began functioning as a surname element in its own right. Families recorded as Williamson Proditer across multiple generations had the designation so embedded in their community identity that it persisted in local records long after the original conviction. The English phonetic corruption of proditer produced variants that appear as predator, prodder, and eventually forms that merged with existing English surname patterns, obscuring the original legal designation. If your surname carries unusual prod or pred prefix elements with no obvious occupational or geographic explanation, the name may have begun as a court designation rather than a family choice. Let me tell you about the most direct traitor surname in the Western naming tradition: Judas. The name of the apostle who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, so synonymous with betrayal in medieval Christian culture that it functioned as a universal shorthand for treachery across every language in Europe. The surname Judas, and its variants Judd and Jukes, appears in medieval records in two distinct contexts. The first is religious, a family with a biblical naming tradition. The second is forensic, a family who received the name as a community designation after a documented act of betrayal. Court rolls from the 13th and 14th centuries contain entries for men described as John le Judd or William le Judd, with the definite article Lee indicating not a family name, but a specific identifying label: this man, this particular Judd. A name chosen by a family does not need a definite article. A name assigned by a community to identify a specific person's specific quality does. If your surname is Judd or Jukes with medieval English roots, your family name may have been assigned rather than chosen. And the reason may be sitting in a court roll nobody in your family has ever read. The surname coming next was assigned by a king, personally, in writing. and the document still exists. Imagine your family name becoming permanently associated with one of the most hated men in medieval England. Hugh Despencer the Younger was the royal favorite of King Edward II in the 1320s, the most powerful man in England after the king himself, and he used that power with a ruthlessness that made him the most despised figure of his era. He accumulated land through coercion and fraud. He imprisoned noblewomen to force them to surrender their estates. He ran a protection racket from the royal court. When Edward II was deposed in 1327, orchestrated by his own queen Isabella and her lover Roger Mortimer, Despencer's fate was immediate and spectacular. He was drawn through the streets, hanged, castrated, his organs burned in front of him while still alive, beheaded, his body quartered and distributed to 4 cities. The Despencer name, a prestigious aristocratic occupational surname for 2 centuries, became overnight a mark of shame so powerful that families carrying it faced specific social and legal pressure to abandon it. Some did, some didn't. And the families that kept it carried the weight of that history into every subsequent generation. If your surname is Despencer, Spencer, or any phonetic variant, you are carrying a name turned into a mark of infamy by one man's catastrophic abuse of royal favor. The surname coming next was not destroyed by one man's ambition. It was destroyed by a family's loyalty to the wrong side of a civil war. The name Mortimer comes from the Norman French mort mer, Dead Sea. Quiet, still, contained. The Mortimer family was none of those things. Roger Mortimer, the first Earl of March, orchestrated the deposition of Edward II, the execution of Despencer, and governed England during the minority of Edward III. He was the most powerful man in England for 4 years, and he was the lover of the Queen. When Edward III seized power in 1330 in a night raid on Nottingham Castle, Mortimer's fall was as spectacular as his rise. He was arrested, tried before Parliament, convicted of treason for usurping royal power, and for the murder of Edward II, he was executed at Tyburn in November 30 without being allowed to speak in his own defense. Parliament ruled his crimes were so notorious that no defense was necessary. His family survived. His descendants recovered the earldom 2 generations later, but the Mortimer name carried a specific resonance in English political culture for generations. Ambition taken too far. Power seized rather than granted. The intimate betrayal of a king by the man who slept with his mother. If your surname is Mortimer, you are carrying the name of a family that came within 1 generation of establishing a new royal dynasty, and failed because a teenage king had the courage to take back his own crown. The final surname is the most personal, because the traitor it commemorates was never executed. They were simply never forgiven. Most people assume Turnbull is a picturesque farming reference. Turn the Bull, a strong man who could physically turn a charging bull. Agricultural, honest, simple. That is one origin story. Here is the other. The Turnbull family of the Scottish borders appear in medieval records connected to a specific act of personal betrayal. The family's name, according to Scottish border tradition, was given not because an ancestor turned a bull, but because an ancestor turned on a king. A man of the family, later known as Turnbull, was present when the Scottish king was in danger. He had the opportunity to act in the king's defense. He did not act. He turned away. Whether the name originated from this incident or from the bull-turning story, the Turnbull family's presence in the Borderers' records, lists of families known for switching allegiances and operating outside the law of both Scotland and England, gives the name a specific documentary context. Border Reaver families were not simply criminals. They were people who had made a specific choice about loyalty, not to the Scottish crown, not to the English crown, to their own clan and their own survival. Turning away from a king in his moment of need was not considered shameful by the Border Reaver standard. It was considered rational. Kings came and went. The border remained. If your surname is Turnbull with Scottish border roots, you are carrying a name associated with switching sides, with turning when the moment demanded turning. For over 600 years, treason marks did not disappear with the medieval period. They were embedded into surnames, passed to children who had done nothing wrong, carried by descendants who had no idea what the name on their birth certificate originally meant. The surnames on this list are not shameful, they are historical. The record of families who found themselves on the wrong side of power and survived anyway. Subscribe. See ya.